Master Sergeant, Cole tried to address him on the comms. I'm now in the belief that your team is in danger. We're witnessing nothing but carnage at this point. I recommend we get more men to the area before you and your team get hurt. Hurt from what? Wei replied with some annoyance. This is a rescue mission for the crew of the Columbus. If this is a few crew members that mutinied, we can take care of them. From what I can see with the evidence, everything we've seen in our own resources being used against our own equipment, I can blame this on some space madness or something. But we'll never know unless we go and check. We have a mission to follow through. Your objection has been noted, Staff Sergeant. I don't need to hear any more of it. Aye, Master Sergeant, Cole replied. The team progressed slowly together. Their breathing was heavy as Uluwaihi was watching his screen. The sensor he had was giving off a small pinging sound as it was getting closer to the source of the beacon. It would slowly increase in its rhythm as they got closer and closer. The recon drone continued to give more data ahead of them, which indicated more of what they saw up close. Penn's gun seemed to shake slightly as he looked at the passageway. Nerves were high as everyone did their best to remain together. Only by staying as a team was everyone more level-headed. They would walk past a blown door to see the quarters of some crew member. It was a quick glance, but there was no indications of any significant struggle inside. However, there were indications of bullet holes on the side walls of the passageway. It was a hell of a fight, Felix commented. The crew were fighting for their lives. Felix's screen was continuing to flicker major deep red spots ahead of the team. It would come in and disappear. There is no glitch, Felix commented as he looked at it. Uluwaihi, mind helping me out on this? I can't explain it either, Uluwaihi replied. I can see the tracking beacon is fully engaged, but my scanners are showing just mass. Explain, Wei asked, holding the hand up to halt the team. They came to a stop. Master Sergeant, Uluwaihi explained, I just switched my mode to Felix's and I'm getting the same readings as he's getting. I went and switched it back to the deep biological scans and I'm reading just body mass. I'm not picking up multiple smaller body signatures, but like if everyone was together. Where is it located? Wei asked. Ahead of us and to the left, Felix answered. I would say another 40 meters. Looks like it's the crew lounge. Think that's where everyone is at? Yeah, Uluwaihi confirmed with unease. Life signs? The ensign is alive and near that room. On the other room adjacent to it. He's alive, according to this. I'm picking up life signs in the new lounge. It's just, I've never seen it like this before. Wei gave the go-ahead to keep moving forward. The recon drone was nearing the door that the ensign was at. The team was moving in step as their guns and weapons were at the ready. Zalika, Cole asked her through the comms. How much longer before you can get power in the computers? Making progress. Wish you'd stop asking me, Zalika was saying with annoyance. Another 15 minutes. Kraz? All set here, Kraz replied on the comms. I went and updated the captain on the Paul Jones, Kareen informed on the comms. Captain is recommending on sending more personnel and pulling back. The Master Sergeant stopped as he held up his hand. The team came to a stop as they passed by another set of doors. The recon drone was about to reach the door where the ensign was located. Wei was weighing his options. We're about to reach the crew, Wei replied. We can at least confirm what happened with them and whether they need our help. He seemed to think about it for a few seconds as the team held their ground. A loud bang sound came from near the room the drone was in. It startled Harper and Penn as they shook from their spot. The team looked back to see the shower of debris where the elevator was located. They had traversed halfway to the other side of the ring. Food! A distant male voice came from the room furthest right ahead of the team. Wei was broken out of his thinking as he looked at the direction of the sound. Back on the ventral bridge, Beckra's head tilted a little bit as Chuang watched the scene unfold on the visor feed. He then looked over to Cole, who had a severe look of concern on his face. "That came from the moon where Ensign Burton is at," Felix said. "There are survivors." Wei seemed to relax. Felix's recon drone turned its primary camera at the blasted opening where the ensign was located. The door was melted open, allowing the drone's lights to peek into the room. Felix and the rest of the team could see a standard room for crew quarters. 2 beds were busted and thrown about. The table was broken apart with tiny pieces floating around the room. In the center of the room was an ensign who was looking away from the recon drone. His back was turned to it as the recon drone was in the same place looking at the person. "Come on, team," Wade gestured to his Marines. "We need to help them." The Marine team pressed forward. This time their walking had increased a little bit as they gained more ground. It was the first time they had seen an actual living crew member on the Columbus the entire time they had been on board. Dressed in the red and blue jumpsuit, the man appeared to be standing. The ensign's back was still pointed at the drone. The team continued to blow past door after door, spending little time looking into the other rooms as they moved towards the source of the sound. "Food!" The voice came from the room again. "Ensign Burton!" Wei called out. "This is MTR. We came here to help you and the crew." "Food!" the word repeated. On the ventral bridge, Chuang began to feel a sigh of relief. It seemed the Columbus crew was safe. Regardless, Becra seemed to have a nagging fear as she looked at the camera feed more and more. The team had reached the room where the ensign was located. The drone moved over to the side, keeping its lights aimed at the lone man. Uluwaihi and the master sergeant looked at the ensign, while Cassidy and Penn assumed a defensive stance, watching the passageway. It was here that Felix's eyes beset the other side of the room where the ensign was located. At first, his eyes could not believe what he saw when he could see through the broken-in doors of the crew lounge. The Marine's reaction said it all to the scene he befell. Felix replied in a staggered fashion. "Master Sergeant! Master—" "More food!" Burton said in an odd voice. Wei and Uluwaihi watched as Ensign Burton turned his face at the recon drone. His hand went and tried to swat it as hard as he could. The drone used its vectoring thrusters as it tried to push away from the body that was trying to attack it. Another hand swing caught and grabbed the recon drone from the air. Burton held it close to his face. Something came out of the man's hand as it began to melt the drone. A fizzling sound could be heard as the drone's camera started to melt slowly. There was a sizzling pop as it broke apart in the ensign's hands. The man then turned to look at Wei and Uluwaihi. Burton had a pale complexion. His short blonde hair was beset by one thing that was different above all else. His eyes were solid silver. There were no irises to the set of pupils. A little bit of silver seemed to bleed from the tear ducts. A look of happiness was on the man's face. For Felix, it seemed as if time stopped for him. Harper came around to point his gun, and his face went pale at the scene. Inside the crew lounge, the sounds of breathing filled the air. Numerous individuals stood as if nothing had happened. They seemed oblivious to the Marines until one turned around. The inside was grisly. The entire bulkheads of the crew lounge were covered with a large silver and red biomass. There was a sizable singular breathing sac that was taking in the air like it was breathing. Bones of people adorned the walls. Gore and blood seemed to line all around the room. On one table was a silver-like puddle with a woman's arm that seemed half dissolved into it. On the part of the wall was a set of heads and skulls that were mended together by the red and silver mass. Triple sets of pupils turned to look at Felix. The eyes glowed to them as if it was peering into his soul. A tentacle-like ligament in another portion of the room seemed to hover in zero gravity. It seemed to point and almost look at the Marine team that was sitting outside the door. It was appalling. It was as if somebody took several men and women and brought their bodies to a grinder. It was a sickening wall of biomass that seemed to be almost alive. Pus, blood, and what looked like mercury all appeared to be mended together, covering the walls. Most of it was directed at the room's equipment, but the longer one looked at it, the longer it seemed to get into your brain. Occasionally, strings of guts stretched from one end of the room to the other like veins. Back on the bridge, Chuang's eyes went wide. Cole displayed a look of shock and disgust as to what they were seeing. It was Bekra that broke out in the largest shrill ever. "Run!" Bekra screamed at the top of her lungs. "Run! Get out of there now!" Her tail seemed to tense up as if she saw a ghost. She watched the camera feed and knew the Marines were in the gravest danger ever beset to them. It might have already been too late.